It's Will! It's Saturday! I had to put the intro in. Yeah, I've really missed Bookfighters and doing these videos. I haven't missed reading that much, which I will get to later. But basically, in the last 5 years, including the time that we were doing Bookfighters, 5 years ago, I was about to start my junior year of art school. 4 years ago, I was dropping out of art school and moving back in with my parents in Pennsylvania. And guess where I still live? I was getting really, really sick. And I've gotten progressively more sick, which is part of why I say I don't miss reading that much, because it was getting to be really, really stressful for me, especially while I was doing an English degree at the same time, which I have now finished. I finished it, I guess it was right before Bookfighters 2.0 ended. It was December of 2012. That I finished the classes for it, and then I graduated that May. Right now, I can see right up over there is my degree that I'm still really, really proud of, even if it does have my old name on it. But, yeah, so in the last 5 years, I've dropped out of one school, graduated another with a totally, wildly different degree. I've changed my name. I feel like a lot has happened, but also, like Dan was saying, not much. So for me, it's everything has changed, but not a lot has happened. The reason I'm having so much difficulty with reading, when I was 23, so like, about 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, which explains a lot of things, actually, even though I have really, really weird dyslexia, I guess, because it didn't show up too much when I was a kid, at least not in the traditional sense of difficulty with reading, which that's been difficult because I was always really, really good with reading as a kid. Like, I would read so much, and I would usually be reading above the grade level of what I was in, or at least I could. I wasn't necessarily always interested in doing that. But yeah, starting when I was about kind of in high school and then on into college, and definitely by the time the original Bookfighters started, I was having a lot more trouble. And it's gotten a lot more difficult since then, because not only do I have the dyslexia that's getting worse, I also have ADD that, obviously, I've had that all my life, too. I was diagnosed when I was 7, but, that's getting worse. And then also, extra fun, since April, I've been having increasing vision impairment. I have double vision, that persists even when I close one eye, so it's probably a neurological thing. So, as I'm sure you can imagine, having double vision and reading anything, but especially prose, is really, really difficult for me. So I haven't read a whole lot, other than just short things for class. Like I read Candide, but that's not that long. I haven't read much, and I certainly haven't finished much since Bookfighters ended. The only thing I know for certain that I did definitely read all the way through and finish, that I remember clearly, is The Bacchae by Euripides, and I absolutely loved that. It was really, really important play for me. Lately, I've been reading a lot of poetry, as some of you maybe saw. I think I've mentioned it on Twitter sometimes. I'm getting a manuscript ready. I'm editing it. I think I'm on, like, 5th or 6th draft of it right now. But I'm getting together a manuscript of a poetry collection to send out to a press, or maybe a couple, So that's exciting. Yeah, I've been reading a lot of poetry, and I've also recently started reading comic books again. I hadn't done that at all growing up, and then I started reading X-Men comics back in 2011 after First Class came out, and I went on this X-Men kick. And then I kind of fell off of that when I was reading Les Mis, or trying to read Les Mis, and also trying to read War and Peace at the same time, because that's the kind of overachiever that I am. Poetry, comic books, anything that doesn't have big blocks of text is a lot easier for me to read. I've also read tons and tons of fan fiction. That's primarily what I've been reading until recently, when I started reading primarily poetry and such. Just because that's usually more broken up and there's space between paragraphs and it's a lot easier to read. Okay, so I want to read this. I was gonna say first paragraph, but the first paragraph is an entire page. The first little bit of Lee Hunt's On the Realities of Imagination, which is basically imagination and reality, of course, but also translating that into literature. Because to me, the main purpose of literature is to imagine things, to imagine the future better, to borrow from J.K. Rowling, and to not only necessarily imagine better, but to realize the reality of flaws in our society and such, and then combat them. That, to me, not just in society, but in ourselves as well. So I'm going to read this first part. Hopefully, I've read this through several times, so hopefully I get this right. Vision though, so who knows. There is not a more unthinking way of talking than to say such and such pains and pleasures are only imaginary, and therefore to be got rid of or undervalued accordingly. There is nothing imaginary in the common acceptation of the word. The logic of Moses in The Vicar of Wakefield is a good argument here. Whatever is, is. Whatever touches us, whatever moves us, does touch us and does move us. We recognize the reality of it, as we do that of a hand in the dark. We might as well say that a sight which makes us laugh, or a blow which brings tears to our eyes, is imaginary, as that anything else is imaginary which makes us laugh or weep. We can only judge things by their effects. I see a lot involved, as I am to the extent that I am, in academia, in literature academia specifically. I have a lot of friends that are working on master's degrees, PhDs, and, you know, you go on Reddit in academia or literature or whatever, and there's all these people talking about this type of fiction isn't good enough, that type of fiction isn't good enough, and grading things based on genre, mostly. And then, of course, being involved in fandom and writing fan fiction and reading, especially fan fiction, there's a lot of judgment of what is good enough to be recognized, to be thought about critically. And that really, really bugs me. Basically, I really like that passage of Hunt, because the point is, whatever affects you, and if it doesn't affect anyone else, that's fine, but it still affects you, and that doesn't it shouldn't be dismissed. Its effect on you shouldn't be dismissed. Even if it's something like Twilight or 50 Shades of Grey, that we can go on and on about how poorly written they are. And I would say, yeah, those two, they are poorly written. There's a lot of things that are poorly written that nonetheless affect people. Now, whether or not they affect people in a good way, that's a whole other discussion. But when something has an impact on someone and impacts their life, that's important. Like right now, I had this realization about my career based on reading a fan fiction. It's an important realization and it affects me. And if you read, you will be impacted by it. It doesn't really matter what you read. I mean, people always talk about, even just read a cereal box. And okay, that's kind of... I'm not going to claim that cereal boxes are literature. I'm just not. If they start putting literature on the back of cereal boxes, cool. But, you know, I've read things that would generally be really looked down upon, and they've been kind of amazing. Even ones that haven't been so amazing, can still have an impact. You know, whether it's a personal impact, a cultural impact, in which case I would say, yes, even My Immortal. We could talk all day about what's good literature versus bad literature and get absolutely nowhere. But as far as what is literature, it's writing that affects you. It's writing that affects someone, anyone, anywhere, whoever reads it. Maybe not everyone who reads it, but someone who's read it. You know, that was... When I was in art school, we'd get asked all the time, what is art? There was a time after a party, 3 a.m., my friends are all really drunk. So, of course, we start discussing the school motto, if it disturbs you, it's art. My argument was, it should be changed to, if it is art, it disturbs you. And with the acknowledgement that disturb is not inherently a negative effect. It just means it affects you. It means it changes you in some way. So that's my little thing. It has been really great watching all your videos, or at least I'm sure it will be as of the recording of this. Only Dan's video is up because it's Monday. And I don't get to say, Dan, I'll see you tomorrow, because there aren't going to be videos next week because this was a one-off thing and it's weird and I don't know how to end this video. So I will just say bye.